So I stopped in the middle of chapter 19 last week. So we're going to start in the middle of chapter 19 this week. It's kind of how that works. So we ended with the triumphal entry. And remember, I know I sound like a broken record, but everything post transfiguration is Jesus on his way to Jerusalem. He's on his way to Jerusalem. He's on his way to be crucified. And so that ends up being, obviously in Luke, that's the climactic moment whenever Jesus is crucified, buried, and of course we have the resurrection narrative. So we talked about the triumphal entry, and of course he was fulfilling Zechariah by riding on the colt, and people throwing their cloaks on the colt, and people spreading cloaks on the road. Some accounts say that they were dropping palm leaves on the road. It signified this royal entry into Jerusalem. And so the people are starting to see. And remember in Luke, he's doing something really cool. He's drawing this really big contrast between physically blind people and spiritually blind people. And so there's a lot of irony that Luke builds into that. Being a doctor, it kind of makes sense that that's where he's going with that, because it's fun. Matthew does a lot of stuff with numbers. That makes sense because Matthew is a bean counter, a tax collector. And Matthew does really cool stuff with numbers throughout his entire gospel. Luke does some really cool stuff with physical, kind of that physical versus spiritual healing. And it's just because of the nature of what they do and how they're wired, which I think is really cool because it shows the freedom that people have to be able to tell stories in a way that fits their personality and who they are. So it's pretty cool. So when we talk about the Bible being inspired by the Holy Spirit, it's not like this mechanical, the Spirit grabbed their pen and wrote all the words, and it's like this really mechanic way of writing. They had wild freedom for how they retold the stories, how they pieced them together. It was not common to take stories and put them in chronological, like a journal entry, the way that we do it today. That was not typical. And so a lot of people get bent out of shape, and they're like, wait, these stories, this happened in the beginning of Jesus' ministry, but this writer puts it at the end of his ministry. Well, that's not the point. Whenever they rewrite the stories, the point's not to give you chronology in a very mechanical way. It's to tell a story and to tell that theologically about who God is. It all points to who God is. That's the point. So anyway, Jesus replies at the end, the Pharisees are like, well, rebuke her disciples. And Jesus answered, I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out. All right, here's where we left off, and here's where we're going to pick up. And when he drew near and saw the city. Now, keep in mind, he's coming from where? You remember? You remember what city? Jericho. It's a 17-mile, you're going from about 1,000 feet below sea level to 2,500 feet above sea level. When they say you're going up to Jerusalem, from Jericho, you really are going up to Jerusalem, like straight up. So it's 17 miles of switchbacks all the way up to Jerusalem. Yep, the city on the hill. And also, Jerusalem means city of peace, which is... Yeah, right. And from obviously from a military strategic positioning, you want to take the high ground. So very, very cool stuff. But he gets up onto the city, and when he gets up to where he's at, like it's the Mount of Olives area, you're actually overlooking all of Jerusalem, but you can see the temple. So you're actually like higher than the temple. And he's looking out, and something breaks inside of him. The word for wept here doesn't mean like he cried or it's like a soft cry or he teared up. The word for wept here means literally something like wailing or screaming in agony. So it would be like the funeral. Do you ever see funerals in Jamaica when you go? Okay. So you didn't see the actual funeral procession. Did you hear the funeral processions?
We witnessed the parties that happened.
Yeah.
They're very lively about it. They want to celebrate the person's life.
Right? Yeah. So there's typically, you have, it's almost like a very dramatic one end of the spectrum and then the other end of the spectrum. You have the public wailing, where people will yell and shout, and you'll, like if a child dies especially, you'll have the parents following the bier or the casket, and they'll be yelling and screaming and begging for their child to come back, and and then all the other people wail with them. So it's like a public wailing, and it's expressing the sorrow. But then there's the joyful part of that too. Then that turns into, they have like literal marching bands, and they go down the streets, and they have in typical Caribbean fashion, they do the bullhorns, and you can't ever understand what they're saying on the megaphones. And so you have your street preachers who are going out, and they'll be like preaching about the kingdom of God and how God is so good. And the people are like dancing and celebrating in the street. I actually have a video from Haiti that Julian sent me that's it's pretty spectacular. So the word for weeping that Luke uses here is like, it's this audible wailing, like he is losing everything inside of him. This is not a quiet. I think of Joseph. Whenever Joseph went in another room and he's crying so loud that they hear him beyond the walls, they can hear him weeping and wailing. This is what Jesus is doing here. So I don't want you to think like, oh, Jesus wept. He cried a little bit. Incidentally, DP's favorite verse, John 11:35, it's the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. It's the same word that's used. When Jesus wept for Lazarus, it wasn't a soft, he didn't go into the privacy of, the corner of the room, and he's like, all right, I got to be strong. No, he wailed. This was an audible, very clearly anybody within a quarter mile of him would have heard him wailing. So very interesting to me and important to me that Jesus wept over Jerusalem. He was that upset about it, saying, would that you, even you, had known on this day the things that make for peace. He's literally looking at Jerusalem, which literally means the city of peace. It's the city on the hill. They're supposed to be a beacon to the rest of the entire world. And he says, would you had known the things that make for peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side and tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you. And they will not leave one stone upon another in you because you did not know the time of your visitation. Talking about when he was there. Jesus was there. He is peace. And they didn't acknowledge him. And so he's weeping over Jerusalem, which is supposed to be the beacon for the rest of the world. Now, obviously here he is pointing to AD 70 when Rome came in. Rome literally surrounded the city. They built ramparts, which are the ramps going up to the wall. They would take the battering rams and they would ram the walls around the city. They got entrance into the city, and then from there they toppled the temple. So if you go to Jerusalem today, you'll find these massive stones that have been toppled over, and they're crushed, they're broken. There are still some of the original foundational stones to the temple that are there. Now, these stones are massive. And I'm talking like one stone, probably the length of this pew, and I don't know, probably as thick as 2 pews, and probably, 8 feet high or something absolutely insane. Every single one of those stones that made up the temple is that big all the way to the top. Now, the interesting thing about that is we have insight into the construction in the Old Testament. When they built the temple, not the sound of one chisel was allowed to be heard at the temple site. It was a holy site to God, and so it was not a site meant to be noisy and, people working and hammering and chiseling. So all of those stones, which, by the way, interesting construction back then, they would build these so that you couldn't see seams. So it looked like one continuous plastered wall. Like we have mud, when we do drywall, we mud them. They didn't mud their walls. They built them in a way that you couldn't fit a hair in between them. I mean, precision mining. And all of those stones were carried miles away from Jerusalem, up to 2,500 feet. There's still a big question and a question mark. How did they do it? There are a lot of theories. I don't want to get into that because that's not really the purpose of what Luke is writing here. But very interesting stuff. You can find a lot about the building of the temple. Absolutely fascinating to me. But he's pointing to the time when Rome came in and they toppled. Yeah, go ahead. That's right. Sing us a solo.
I don't think it really is that important as to which way you interpret it, but one thing that I always thought of, you did not recognize the time of your visitation as being more like the time of your judgment. Because there's other verses where, like Second or First Peter, or where it talks about the day of visitation. So you think that you think that this actually refers to Jesus' visitation?
It could be. I mean, it's always hard to tell because it can be like a lot of times you have both and. And so
especially when it comes to the destruction of Jerusalem, there's a lot of times we're talking about the end and that, like the end of the world and the destruction, where there's correlations at least.
Yeah.
But
very possible. To me, it doesn't really change the
that's what I meant. It doesn't really. I don't think it really changes anything that he's saying here or why he's upset about it. Either way.
Yeah. The point is that they rejected what brings peace. Not just peace to Jerusalem, but what does he say repeatedly? Peace on earth. It's like he is what and who brings peace everywhere. And we look around today and like it's tragic. You look at what's happening in Nigeria, like the genocide with Christians. You have, what is it, over 100,000 Christians who've been slaughtered since 2009. Over 100,000.
It was pretty. We went to Nigeria when I was in college, and it was pretty rough then, but nothing like.
Now it's.
We had some of our group get arrested, but it was just a brief. Like they didn't hold them or anything, and like so. It's really bad now.
Yeah, really bad. So and that's happening all across the globe, and it ebbs and flows. Obviously, that's a case in point. Haiti. Last time we went was 2019, and it was very safe. Now, it was like right on the verge of facing instability, but shortly after we left, their president was assassinated, and then from there, it's just like the gangs completely overtook it. And now there's, very, very public, like raping women and children in the streets. It's brutal. And Cap Haitian is a little bit better off, but the gangs have taken over. Port-au-Prince is really bad. And when we talk about slums, like it literally is not safe for anyone. It's bad. And the living conditions are absolutely unreal. It wasn't like that in 2019. Now there were pockets where it was kind of bad, but it's, and this is happening all over the world. And so when Jesus wept, this isn't like, he wasn't like looking out and like, oh, you said naughty words, like some of the things that Christians get offended at. It's like, no, this is brutality that's happening in Jerusalem, and it's because you rejected me as the Son of God. And if you look at the things that bring peace, if we would only accept that today, can you imagine what the world would be like? Now, we get a little bit of a taste of, actually a lot of a taste of it here in America. People complain about America, which don't get Terry started on that one. We have very little to nothing to complain about here. When's the last time that you were ducking for cover when you went out on a walk or a bike ride? Like, my kids are like, hey, can I walk over to the school? Go for it. They go on walks all the time, and they go by themselves. They walk to school by themselves. We don't think twice about it. And so when you understand what brings peace and you reject that, and this is the outcome of that, in the epicenter where peace is supposed to go forth throughout all the earth, it's devastating. So, okay, I better keep going. And he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold, saying to them, it is written, my house shall be a house of prayer. That comes from Isaiah. He's quoting directly from Isaiah. But you have made it a den of robbers. That comes from Jeremiah. He's quoting two different scriptures, putting them together. They knew exactly what he was quoting. And this is really interesting because what's the time of year? What's the big feast that's coming up? Jesus is about to be crucified. What's the big feast? Yeah, it's the Passover. And so all the Jewish people were required to come to Jerusalem no matter where they lived in the diaspora. So everybody had to come to Jerusalem. There were 3 times a year that they had to come to Jerusalem for feast. This was one of them. When they came, they also had to offer the required sacrifices. And this is where, it's important to understand what's going on and why Jesus is so upset here. This all was happening in the court of the Gentiles. It's the last place where non-Jewish believers were able to enter. Beyond the court of the Gentiles, nobody else could go. Only Jewish people could go further inside the inner court. So in the court of the Gentiles is where they would sell animals. Now, people are coming from where? All over the place. Can you carry a lamb efficiently? Can you carry a lamb with you when you're traveling, say, from Rome to Jerusalem? No, of course not. And so the religious leaders, they knew this, and they capitalized on it. Now, just to give you a little bit of an idea of how much money you can exact from people by ripping them off, just to put numbers in perspective, like we're doing a 200 envelope challenge. Each of those numbers, 1 through 200, each number represents a dollar amount. So the absolute highest dollar amount is $200 that anybody possibly can give, unless you do multiple envelopes. 1 through 200 envelopes is worth $20,000. Now, to put this in perspective, Josephus, the historian, wrote about Passover in Jerusalem, and he said that there was a count. Now, people are questioning whether he's using like the preacher's count and exaggerating a little bit, but they figure he's fairly close. But Josephus said they did a count at the temple during the Feast of Passover, and there were 255,000 and some odd lambs. 255,000 lambs that were slaughtered in a 3-hour period. There's a 3-hour window. Now, I just want to give you a sense of what's happening at the temple. That doesn't include the other animals, the doves, and things from poorer people. So imagine if you're inflating the numbers on all of those lambs for all the people coming outside. They have to purchase an unblemished lamb. And so what they would do at the temple is they would sell them. They would increase the price because, what happens when you go out to vacation during peak season? Do the rates go up or do they go down? They don't just go up. They skyrocket. Why? Because, yeah, it's supply and demand. The way they figure is, well, you're going to pay it, because what's the alternative? You don't go on vacation? Well, I'm not going to give up vacation. Well, here it's mandated. They have to go. And they have to provide a sacrifice. It's required, according to the law of Moses. All right, so the people are coming in, and they're getting ripped off on the lambs, and they would like inflate the prices, but they would also double dip. And they would say things like, well, this one, they would get inside, like they would leave the court of Gentiles. They would bring the lamb to the priest. The priest had to inspect it and make sure that there were no blemishes. Only a priest could determine, and a priest would look at it and be like, there's a spot. What do you mean there's a spot? Well, there's a spot right here. I don't see no stinking spot. There's a spot. You know, and so they would go back and forth, and some of the animals were being rejected. Do you think they got a refund? A refund on the lamb?
You think they paid the priest and the priest let it go?
I think 100% the priests were in on it, yeah. So they would have to go back and purchase another lamb. So they're double dipping, and the blemished lambs would get recycled, right? They'd be put back into the mix without a refund. And so, like, it's this kind of thing going on there. People are getting ripped off, double ripped off. But they also they had to use the temple coin. They couldn't use the Roman coins because it had the figure of Tiberius on it, Emperor Tiberius. And on the side with Tiberius's image, it said, Tiberius Caesar, son of divine Augustus. Son of the God, son of divine Augustus. On the other side, on the back side of the Roman coin, it said in Latin, Pontiff Maxim, which means high priest. Very offensive to use that coin to pay for things in the temple. So you had to use the temple coin, which meant there's an exchange rate. Well, who determines the exchange rate? It's not a one-to-one. It's not a $1 to $1. It's, you know, if you've ever done exchange rates in other countries, you know that in one direction you benefit, and in the other direction you get ripped off. You lose money. You lose a lot of money.
Jimmy, when I was in Germany, it was 2-to-1, buddy. We made out like bandits over
Ooh, yeah. So yeah, there's one way where you make out really well. 2-to-1, somebody's making out on that, and somebody's losing. All right. So this is what was going on. So they're like double, triple dipping, just ripping people off. How appealing would that be for the Gentiles, by the way, to come to God when all this chaos is going on? So anyway, this is what set Jesus off. This wasn't like, oh, well, Jesus walked in and it was just like busy and, you know, there's this kind of stuff going on. He was livid. By the way, also, just to give you a sense of the size of the temple, a lot of times we don't think about it because we don't have visuals, and we just don't realize the size of this. So imagine slaughtering 255,000 lambs in a 3-hour period. The way that they did it is they would form lines, and they were very efficient. They had marble tables. They were very efficient. They would have priests lined up in multiple lines, so a whole bunch of priests, and the head of the family was responsible to slit the throat of the lamb. When the head of the family would slit the throat of the lamb, and they would divide it, one lamb was shared between 10 to 20 people. A priest would be there with a bucket. He would collect the blood, and then they would pass this up the line, and they would sprinkle it on the altar, and that blood would go through grates in the floor, and it would be caught in a basin, along with all the fecal matter and stuff. Like, they would clean the organs out, and then they would tie the cleaned organs. They had a high-pressure water system, like pretty technologically advanced for 2,000 years ago. all of this stuff would collect in a basin. I mean, thousands of gallons of blood and fecal matter and all the stuff from the guts when they cleaned the organs. And then they had a lever, and they would pull a lever at some point, and it would take water, fresh water, and it would sweep all of that stuff out, and it would go down into the Kidron Valley. Well, it would collect there, and then they had a process where they would then resell that as fertilizer, very sought after fertilizer for farmers, very high in all kinds of nutrients, and nothing was wasted.
There was lots of perks there.
Yes. So I'm guessing, I don't know, I didn't really research this that deeply, but I imagine that money from selling the fertilizer went right back into the temple, because they kind of owned the rights to the fertilizer. I assume. I don't know for sure. All right, so Jesus is obviously pretty ticked off about this. So he said, my house shall be a house of prayer, but you made it a den of robbers. And he was teaching daily in the temple. The chief priests and the scribes and the principal men of the people were seeking to destroy him. So it's the leaders, the spiritual leaders, who are seeking to destroy him. But they did not find anything they could do, for all the people were hanging on his words. Literally, this word means they were hanging on him. They were hanging on him. It was an expression to mean that somebody was, they were like infatuated. They were listening intently to every single thing that he said. So kind of interesting here. What do you not find in this narrative? What do you not find in this temple narrative that you do find in other Gospels? Luke kind of, say it. Yeah, Luke kind of simplifies it. He's like, yeah, he began to drive out those who sold. He doesn't really put emphasis on, like, some of the other accounts, he braided together like these cords of whips. And then he's like whipping and flipping tables over and driving them out. Here, Luke just says he began to drive out those who sold. So kind of interesting that he doesn't give those details. And whatever, we all have our own reasons. I think that Luke, my opinion, I think that Luke theologically is focusing more on Jesus being sorrowful over what's happening in Jerusalem than the righteous anger of Jesus. That he's driving people out and he's like very intentionally flipping tables. I think Luke really wants to point us down that direction of sorrow and brokenness. And people trying to trip him up. He's really focusing, Luke, you'll find this, Luke is focusing on the fact that they're being deceptive and they keep trying to trip Jesus up. All right, so we'll finish this up here. And he was teaching daily in the temple. The chief priests and the scribes and the principal men of the people were seeking to destroy him. But they did not find anything they could do, for all the people were hanging on his words. All right, we're going to start chapter 20, because this is all tied together. One day, as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple and preaching the gospel, the chief priests and the scribes with the elders came up and said to him, "Tell us, by what authority you do these things? Or who is it that gave you this authority?" He answered them, "I also will ask you a question. Now tell me, was the baptism of John from heaven or from man?" And they discussed it with one another, saying, "If we say from heaven, he will say, 'Why did you not believe? Why did you not believe him?' But if we say from man, all the people will stone us to death, for they are convinced that John was a prophet." So they answered that they did not know where it came from. And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." Brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. Then he began to tell the people this parable. A man planted a vineyard and let it out to tenants and went into another country for a long while. All right away, for us, it doesn't really do this because we don't memorize typically the Old Testament, but people did back then. They would have known exactly what Jesus is referring to, and he's referencing Isaiah chapter 5, verses 1 through 7. Here's what it says. Let me sing for my beloved my song concerning this vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. Sound familiar? He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it, and he hewed out a wine vat in it, and he looked for it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. Obviously, it's this vineyard motif. God is saying, I'm the owner of the vineyard. I planted everything. I did everything right. I put a watchtower in it to keep out, all the people who might come in and destroy it, or the animals or whatever. I built a wine vat in the middle of it. It's going to be the most productive vineyard ever. It's going to be the shining vineyard on the hill. But instead, wild grapes grew up. God did everything right, but it produced wild grapes that are worthless. Then he says, O now, inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? Then I looked for it to yield grapes. Why did it yield wild grapes? And now I tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. And I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. Does this sound familiar at all? It's exactly what happened to Jerusalem. I will make it a waste. It shall not be pruned or hoed, and briars and thorns shall grow up. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant planting. And he looked for justice, but behold, bloodshed; for righteousness, but behold, an outcry. All right, very, very fascinating. So Jesus he's obviously pointing them back to this vineyard motif that's found in Isaiah chapter 5. So he's telling them this parable. When the time came, he sent a servant to the tenants. Who are the tenants? Chief priests, the scribes, the elders. They're the tenants. God said, I'm going to put you over my vineyard. So then he sends out, he went into another country. When it came time, he sent a servant to the tenants so that they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. Anybody know who the tenants are?
They're slaves, aren't they?
Well, then they would, but in the motif, like, who do they represent? The tenants who are going out and talking to the vineyard, the tenants. It's the prophets. God's like, go out and bring back some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him. They beat the servant, just like they did the prophets. Jeremiah, name one. Pick one. They beat him and sent him away empty-handed, and he sent another servant. But they also beat and treated him shamefully and sent him away empty-handed. And he sent a third. This one also they wounded and cast out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, what shall I do? I will send my beloved son. Perhaps they will respect him. Obviously, this is representing Christ. But when the tenants saw him, they said to themselves, this is the heir. Let us kill him so that the inheritance may be ours. And they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When they heard this, they said, surely not. Literally, they said, God forbid. It's like the strongest double negative in the Greek language. They were shocked at this. They were like, no. Like, Isaiah 5 is not about us. But he looked directly at them. Remember the Luke-isms? He makes eye contact with them. He looked directly at them. and said, "What then is this that is written? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken into pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him." So he's talking about rejecting Christ. That's going to crush you. But at the final judgment, that's you, Terry. Your turn. Your mic is on. Sing us a solo. I thought you were beatboxing over there. But when the cornerstone falls on anyone, it will crush him. That's talking about the judgment. Christ is going to judge people, and if you reject that stone falls on you, and it crushes you. Okay, we're going to stop there. We are over time. Were you going to say something at one point, Terry? I just kept, like a freight train, I just keep going. All right, thank you all, and we'll pick back up in a few minutes.
Holy Spirit.